Hi, these are the forensic serology notes, so blood notes on blood spatter. So you should have already watched the notes about blood composition. So now we're going to talk about more of the physical aspects of it and what we're going to look at in terms of spatter, size, shape, all of that. So there we go. All right, so blood stain pattern analysis is the study and analysis of blood stains at a known or suspected crime scene with the purpose of drawing conclusions about the nature, timing, and other details of the crime. The patterns of the blood stain can help in crime scene reconstruction. So what investigators are looking for is to figure out kind of what happened. And the blood stains or patterns themselves can explain a lot of that. They can tell the direction, how fast the blood was going, the angle it was going, like where someone was moving or standing or hit. There's a lot of details they can determine from the blood spatter itself or the pattern or the pool of blood. So some characteristics of blood to note. Blood is a very uniform material, so it's very much the same throughout the whole thing. A drop of blood is circular, so you can see in that picture on the left there that a drop of blood is a sphere as it falls, whereas water will be not quite so uniform when it drops. It's going to be more of kind of that teardrop or kind of an oblong. It's going to kind of depend more on kind of how fast it's moving or the air around it, because blood is more viscous. It's going to be thicker. It's not going to flow as quickly or as freely as water. So that's why water is going to have more things that affect it as it falls versus blood won't. It's going to be much more uniform. A single drop of blood is a very, very, very small amount, 0.05 milliliters. So if you've been in chemistry, you've measured out in milliliters. And a milliliter in one of those little graduated cylinders is only about this much. So maybe like, I don't know, the width of your pinky in one of those little skinny graduated cylinders. So think about 0.05 of that one. So that's a really small amount. It doesn't break up unless something forces it to. So it's going to stay in that droplet form. It will fall. The terminal velocity means the fastest it's going to fall is 25 feet per second. So if blood drops, say, from a really high building, it's not going to go any faster than that 25 feet per second. And then the majority of high velocity, so really fast droplets, are going to be less than 1 millimeter in diameter. So that's going to be about, probably on your screen, approximately like the width of like one of these letter L's. That's very small, 1 millimeter. And they're not going to usually go much farther than 46 inches. That's kind of where it will tap out. So if someone gets hit and blood spatters out of them, even if it's going really fast, or like it gets a gunshot and the blood spatters, it's not going to go any farther than 46 inches. That would be too far for it to travel based on its speed. So there's some physics involved in this. So blood evidence, when you come across what maybe looks like blood evidence, first step is to determine if it's blood. So there are some tests they can do at the crime scene, like luminol is the one you've maybe seen in shows where they do a little swab of it. They're going to put some luminol on it, which will react with the hemoglobin in blood, and under a UV or a black light that will glow. But that doesn't react only with blood. Luminol is going to react with other things. So it's not just a test for blood. It's just telling us it's more likely to be blood versus other things. Dried blood will look different from fresh wet blood. Dried blood looks a lot more less like ketchup and more like barbecue sauce. It's going to be more of that darker, almost brownish color. So first step is to determine if it's blood. They will take a sample back to the lab where they can do an actual analysis of it to find out what it is, and then they can get DNA, all that other stuff as well at that time. When they are recording or collecting the evidence, they're going to look for the location that they're going to record. So where in the room, like when we talked about crime scenes and the evidence, they would take measurements, all that. They would take pictures. They're going to look at the shape of the stain. That's going to tell them something. The direction, which we'll talk about how we can determine that from the drops or the stain. They'll look at the size of the pattern or stain. And then the surface, because the surface that it's on is going to determine kind of like how far it could spread, let's say, or how it's going to look shape-wise. Is it going to stay nice round, or is it going to have kind of those irregular patterns around it? So there's obviously going to be a lot of pictures taken from different angles. They will also, if possible, take the whole piece with the blood on it back to the lab. So like, let's say it was on like a table, they might take the whole table or part of the table off, or cut like a piece of the flooring out and take it with them, if they can. So main types of stains, there's 4 main types. Blood on and around the body would be one. Blood spatter or splashes, so when someone gets hit and the blood, right, moves away from them. So what are those like? Smears, so that would be that kind of contact as it comes in contact with something. This could be like footprints. And then gunshot blood spatter, because that's going to be pretty unique and different compared to like blood spatter from someone punching someone else. All right, so when this information is properly interpreted, an investigator can find out the origin of the blood, like whose blood it is, right? Going to the lab, they can figure that out based on DNA and type, depending on the situation. They can figure out how far away the impact was and where the blood kind of landed, so they can tell how far away. So if they find blood spatter on a wall, they can figure out actually where the person was when they got hit, or kind of where the impact came from. So the type and the direction of the impact, so where it came from, was it a big heavy object? Was it a knife? Was it a gun? Like they can tell kind of what it came from, how many blows there were, where the position, where the victim was, facing which way, standing up, sitting down, lying down, all of those things. And then if they were moving and which direction they were moving, the suspect and the victim. What they will do is they will obviously make estimates and take measurements and all that, but then they'll also go and test it. So they will go in and have dummies and hit them with simulated blood to see if it gives them the pattern that they found at the crime scene. All right, so here are some examples. So on the left is a large blood stain. So that could be like from the body, maybe it dripped down, or the body was laying there and it came out of the body directly onto it. Looks like carpet. There's a spatter pattern on the hand there on the right. That would be from some sort of spray. We've got passive blood stains, so kind of it looks like drips, and you can see they're pretty round in shape, versus like a smear or a trail. You can see the footprint on the right. On the left, we've got void patterns. So it looks like there was an object here, right? Otherwise, why would there be no blood there? And then here it looks like stains and dripping, like it hit and then went down. All right, so angle, we can tell based on the shape what the angle of the blood is. So in these two samples, they're the same height above the ground. So they're both 42 inches above the ground. So 42 inches is, so if here's a meter stick. A meter stick is just over 39 inches, so a little bit higher than that. So if I stand up, you maybe don't know how tall I am, but it's about here. So about here is 42 inches. So if the blood was dropped from this height, okay, for both of them, the one is 10 degrees. So I put a little protractor here. So 0 degrees would be directly perpendicular. So if it drops straight down, that would be 0 degrees. So 10 degrees is just slightly tilted, okay? And it's mostly round, and you can see it has some of these sprays, right? As it hits, right? If it's coming down at this angle and it hits, it's gonna have a little spray, versus if it came down directly, it probably wouldn't. It'd be a nice, perfect circle-ish, depending on the surface. Versus one at 60 degrees, so now we're talking a much steeper angle, right? 90 would be flat, so 60 would be here, 60 from the top. You're gonna get a much more elongated shape of your blood drop. The surface that the blood drop is on is going to be different. A plastic tile will be nice and smooth. If you have a nice smooth surface, you're going to get that nice, perfect round. Again, these are the same height, and they're both at 0 degrees, so they're both straight down, versus the heavy textured wallpaper. When you have an uneven surface, right, the blood drop is going to fall, and then it's going to be able to go down and flow differently, and you're going to get different patterns there. We can tell movement based on the shape. The pointed end always faces the direction of travel. So this person, or whatever this was coming off of, they were moving in this direction. So kind of this down this way. That's pointing, right? Think about it as it falls first, that would be the most blood. And then as it keeps moving away, it's going to be less and less. That's why it gets to that point. Here's another one movement, same kind of thing. They're going to be droplets pointing in the direction, right? As they get smaller, that's the direction it's moving. So like this object would be going from like right to left on your screen. A contact stain would be from like a body. Let's say there's a pool of blood around it, directly in contact. You're going to get more of this big blob. And then how fast the blood is moving when it hits the surface is going to determine its shape also. So the slower it's going, the more blood you're going to get in one spot. So you're going to get these larger spots like in this picture. Usually this is a really forceful impact and it's probably closer as well. Versus small spots are going to be a higher velocity or a higher speed. So the smaller the droplets, the faster the speed. You're going to get probably your smallest blood drops from like a gunshot spatter. All right, so gunshot splatter, like I said, would be the smallest typically. So that's going to be like a 1 millimeter, which is again really small or less. There is typically back spatter, meaning, right, as the blood, let's say the object hits the person, right, the blood's going to spatter back because with every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, if you remember that from 9th grade physical science. So the blood spatter is going to go back. So if the gun is close enough, usually like 3 inches or less, there's going to be blood found inside the barrel of the gun. So that's one of the ways they can tell if they find the gun, how close the gun was to the person, the victim. And then the larger the caliber or gauge gun, meaning the more powerful the gun is, the greater the depth because you have more power from that gun. So it's going to push in harder, which means it's going to come back harder and faster as well. So it's going to go farther into the actual barrel of the gun. All right, so those are your blood spatter notes. Make sure you have written down or documented on the Google Doc all of the notes and things, and let me know if you have questions.